So this new
Thank you,
bill
Tom.
is about avoiding, obviously, spreading the outbreak. We know New Zealand was under a huge lockdown, a very restrictive one before. Do you concede that some new laws are needed in this area to make sure it's not just open slather?
Well, look, Tom, New Zealand's very proud of what we've achieved as a country, but yes, the lockdown has gone on for too long. And we do concede there does need to be new legislation in place to enforce the new rules. But this law, which has been passed by the government under urgency this year, allows the government and through enforcement officers and the police to be able to enter anyone's personal home without a warrant, be able to check to make sure that you don't have more than 10 people coming around for a cup of tea. And that could be your home, it could be your business, it could be anywhere. These are extreme powers which have been given to the police and to enforcement officers, which go against the rule of law.
Let's talk through some of the laws you've highlighted. So allowing enforcement officers to enter and close down premises. So if a shop is flouting laws to do with restrictions, surely someone needs to be able to enter, see if that's happening, and either shut them down or order people to leave, whatever it might be. There has to be some way of doing that, doesn't there?
That's right. And I think the reality is that New Zealanders have done their part in trying to make sure that we fight COVID-19, and there does need to be some legislation put in place to ensure that the new rules can be enforced. However, without being able to enter a premise without a warrant, without having the ability to have that evidence tested, has raised a huge amount of concern by New Zealanders who, particularly when it comes to people's homes, that's going to potentially lead to neighbours dobbing in neighbours, and the police time and resource being used, focusing on quite minor offences or potentially somewhere where it's just a suspicion rather than actually anything which is actually going wrong.
So I get what you're saying about homes. What about businesses, though? You say without a warrant. If there are 20 people in a cafe when there should only be 10 as an example, whatever the restriction is, it's not practical, is it, to get a warrant, to go off to court, get a warrant and then search? By then the people will be gone.
That's right, but I guess the other question here we're raising is around these enforcement officers. There's no definition over who these enforcement officers are. There's no training as to what's been provided. Basically, the government has the ability to deem anybody who works for the Crown an enforcement officer who can then go into a business and shut it down. Look, we believe there should be a high standard. It should be the police, or it should be specific authorised people who should be trained and know what they should be doing, understand the laws and can do this in a proper way. It shouldn't be giving the government such powers to be able to put in place or essentially deem anybody or any group of employees of the Crown the right to do this.
How practical is that? I mean, this is needed now. You're just coming out of restrictions. Yes, you can say police can do it. There are only so many of them. They can't be, making sure each cafe has the right number of people in it. You can't train people up overnight. Don't you need to pull them from existing pools of employees?
Well, look, they're going to have to find people who can do this. But the reality is the government in New Zealand has had the last 7 weeks to look at this issue. This issue arrived on my desk as a Member of Parliament on Tuesday at around 11 o'clock in the morning. We were voting on it by 4 o'clock in the afternoon that same day. They've had weeks. It didn't even go to a select committee for this to be considered by the public and to hear submissions. And so your big issue is that spent the lockdown. They should have been focusing on actually getting ready for lifting the lockdown rather than then ramming something through at the end.
So your issue seems to be more about the people. There was the concern, the other one you raised online, was allowing governments to enforce limits on funerals, weddings, religious services. Again, you understand, I mean, around a funeral, extreme sensitivity, but if there are somehow 100 people crammed around in this funeral, you have to be able to go in and say, sorry, you can't be doing this. Again, are you happy with the enforcement? It's just the people doing it is your issue here?
Look, the issue that we're raising around funerals is a very sensitive one. And I understand that there's strict limits in Australia around the number of people who can attend a funeral.
Yeah.
The argument that we're making is that a funeral is a very important life moment. And the key issue here is that last week the Prime Minister came out and said that funerals, weddings, religious services would be allowed to have up to 100 people. She then came out on Monday and said, actually, no, that's only going to be 10. And so instead of doing what Scott Morrison did, which was come out with a 3-stage plan of lifting restrictions, she came out and raised expectations. Our Prime Minister came out and raised expectations that there would be gatherings of up to 100, and then that was radically dropped back down to 10.
That might be a process issue. But do you get why it can't be 100? Again, I can't imagine having to hold a funeral for a loved one and being told invite 10 people. But if it's going to possibly start a cluster and mean the whole economy in a certain area shuts down,
absolutely, and you know, absolutely, and we need to take fighting COVID-19 very seriously, and we have as a country. The government's now lifted 10 to 50 for funerals, which then does raise the question as to what the rationale for the number 10 was prior to that. And so I guess the question we're raising is on what basis are these decisions being made, and how can we work with New Zealanders who do want to do the right thing, who do want to protect our health, so that we have a clear plan forward, not arbitrary decisions being made, which is what this law essentially allows the Prime Minister to do.
Simeon Brown, thanks for your time today.